Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to City Bible Forum, or The Forum today. My name is Russell Matthews. I want to welcome you today as we're getting ready and continuing on in the Bible on Trial. I have to tell you, today I'm pretty excited. We have Tho Luu who's going to be speaking for us today, right here from the City Bible Forum team. And today's talk in the Bible on Trial series is Jesus on Trial. Is he the only way? But more importantly, let's get Tho up here on the stage. And Tho, I'll turn it over to you.
Have you ever been on trial or ever been in a courtroom? When I worked at the Crown Solicitor's office, one of the most exciting things I got to do was to file documents in court. I'd nervously wait for my turn after all the other paralegals, and I'd say, "My name is Tho Luu, and I'm here on behalf of the Crown Solicitor." And the magistrate or registrar that I was appearing before would often not even bother to look up and make eye contact. Nonetheless, it was often the highlight of my week. You might never have been in court, but I bet you've felt like you've been on trial. Anyone who's here at City Bible Forum today who's started a new job recently? Okay, good. You might have felt like you were on trial at the job interview. You know, when you're there on one side of the table, and on the other side of the table are 3 or 4 other senior-looking people drilling you with questions. Or for others here today, think back to your last performance review with your senior. What was it like? You might have felt like you were on trial. Today at City Bible Forum, Jesus is on trial, and in particular, his exclusive claim. His claim, John chapter 14, verse 6 in your outlines. His claim that I am the way and the truth and the life. His very clear claim, the rest of that verse, no one comes to the Father except through me. Today, Jesus claimed to be not just a way to God, but the only way to God is on trial. Now for me, this is a very personal issue, and it might be for you too. You see, I grew up in a traditional Chinese Buddhist family, and this Chinese Buddhism was something that I inherited from my grandparents who raised me. More than anything else in the whole world, I loved my grandma. There was one Christmas when the radio station, I think it was 1269 AM or something like that, the equivalent of 106.5 FM these days, I think, they were asking for song requests. And my older brothers and sisters goaded me as the 12-year-old, the youngest of all the 5 siblings, to make the call. And so I ring up the Richard Mercer equivalent. He goes, what song would you like to request? I said, Last Christmas by Wham, sung by George Michael before they broke up. And then this question caught me unprepared. And who do you want to send this song out to? Who do you want to dedicate this song to? I said, I was thinking, who do I love most in the whole world? My grandma. And so it was all on the radio. Last Christmas for my grandma. So inappropriate, if you know the words to it. This was from my grandma, who took me in when I was 6 years old to live with her and my grandpa. And my grandma who loved me until the end of her days. In the lounge room that we had, in the house that we grew up in, we had a statue of Guan Yin, the goddess of mercy. And it was before this statue that without fail, every morning and every evening, my grandparents would bow, chanting Buddhist scriptures. And the most precious thing I owned was this amulet with a gold necklace that my grandma gave me, an amulet of the Lord Buddha, given for my protection. So this is a very personal thing for me. Now, growing up with this faith tradition, out of all the religions I came into contact with, the one religion that irked me most was Christianity. And why? Because Christians want other people to become Christians too. They think that other ways don't save, that their way alone saves. This exclusivity of Christianity, however, I came to learn, is not exclusive to Christianity. In fact, Islam makes exclusive claims which conflict with other faiths. So too Judaism and other religions. And even the pluralist, the pluralist who says that all religions are the same, even they make an exclusive claim. Let me illustrate. There's a story of a panel with 3 people. On this panel is a Christian pastor, a Muslim imam, and a Jewish rabbi. And these 3 were asked to discuss the differences between their religions. In this panel discussion, the 3 agreed that there were irreconcilable differences between their faiths. They clearly disagreed with one another on lots of things. These 3 faiths are mutually exclusive. So take, for example, today's question. Christians say that Jesus is the only way to God because of who Jesus is, God in the flesh. Muslims say that Jesus only points the way to God because Jesus is just a prophet of God. Jewish people, at the end of the day, say that Jesus points people away from God because Jesus is neither God nor a prophet, but a teacher, and a false one at that. These 3 faiths are mutually exclusive. Nonetheless, during the course of this panel discussion, these 3 ministers of religion were fine about their faiths being irreconcilable, and they conducted their discussion with mutual respect and courtesy. However, there were members in this audience who weren't so happy with this. For example, one audience member who wanted to assert that the ministers of religion needed to promote more similarity and to stress the similarities between their religions, said that they all had in common their common belief in one God and the need to do good in this world. This audience member reflects the view that there are many paths to God, and that these many paths to God are all different paths up a mountain leading up to the same God. There are many paths to God, and this view has an analogy. It's like going up a mountain where Hinduism is one path up the mountain, Buddhism is another path, Judaism another, Islam, Christianity, and so forth for all the religions of the world. They're all different paths leading to the one and same God on top of the mountain. So this view claims that no one religion has an exclusive claim on the truth. There is not only one way to God, and this view, it sounds humble, doesn't it? This view, it sounds so good, and it sounds tolerant. Whether you're a Christian, a Buddhist, a Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, you might feel attracted to this claim. And why? Because all of us, we want to get along and we want to affirm each other. But in this picture, who is it that has the unique vantage point above all others? Who is it that can see above all the other religions to see that they lead to the same and one God? The person making the claim. In effect, they're claiming that they're at the top of the mountain. How do they know that some of the paths don't lead to dead ends? How do they know that some of those paths don't veer off and lead people to the precipice? The person making this claim is just as exclusive in their claim as the religions that they look down on. So if we don't accept the truth claim that all religions lead you to the same God, what's the way forward? Let me invite you to consider Jesus' path. Jesus claims to come from God and uniquely represent God because he is God. Let me share this both subjectively from my own experience and objectively in a way that hopefully you can also consider and explore the evidence. So my introduction to Christianity was when the Gideon's people, you know the Gideon's people who hand out Bibles everywhere? Well, they came to my school, and I went to a school where there were lots of Jewish people. And all the Jewish students were sent off to the library, lest they be offended by receiving these New Testaments. And I thought, how about me? I'm a Buddhist. Where's the special recognition I get? Where do I get sent to? But nonetheless, I stayed in the hall, and the Bibles were handed out. And you see, because I'm Asian and it was free, I took one. I began reading Matthew's Gospel. And I read about Jesus saying things like, if your hand causes you to sin, chop it off. It's better to go to heaven and not have a hand than to go to hell with both hands. If your eye causes you to sin, gouge it out. It's better to go to heaven than to go to hell with both eyes. And I thought that made sense. And I was drawn to this authority with which Jesus taught. And later, I learnt that Jesus spoke with such authority that he would have deserved to be stoned to death in the culture of his day. So, for example, he quotes the 10 Commandments and says things like, you've heard that it was said, you shall not murder. But I say to you, if you are angry with your brother and call him raka, a term of insult, then you're in danger of hell. And he says, you've heard it said that you shall not commit adultery. But I tell you that if you look at a woman in order to lust after her, you've already committed adultery in your heart. Who does Jesus think he is to restate the 10 Commandments on the strength of his own authority? You've heard that it was said, but I say to you. Jesus speaks with the authority that only one unique person can speak. And so I continued my way, reading through Matthew's Gospel, and then I did the logical thing of reading the next Gospel, Mark's Gospel, and then Luke's Gospel, and I was scratching my head thinking, this is all rather familiar, and a bit of repetition. And through the course of this reading, I read about Jesus' miracles. Just this morning, in my morning Bible reading, I was reading the Gospel of John, the 4th Gospel, and there, Jesus turns water into wine. Or think of Jesus' other miracles. When he's there on a lake in a furious storm and sleeping at the bottom of the boat, and the disciples, who are experienced fishermen, are fearing for their lives, and they call him to wake up and do something about it. And with a word, he makes the storm quiet and the waves calm down. The miracle where he feeds over 5,000 people with, what is it? Is it 2 loaves of bread and 5 fish? I always get the numbers mixed up. And Jesus, who gives sight to the blind, who makes the deaf hear, who helps the lame walk, all at the authority of his word, his command. Jesus has control over the world, over nature, over food, over human life. He does what only one unique being can do. Finally, let me share Jesus' encounter with a paralysed man. This paralysed man comes to Jesus with an obvious need. Imagine this man's infirmities as a paralytic in the 1st century. How could he feed himself? How could he feed his family if he had dependents? How could he get from place to place? But Jesus addresses his biggest need. Jesus says to the man, "Son, your sins are forgiven." And this sounds weird. Firstly, why does Jesus call him son? I'm guessing Jesus was even younger than me when he said these things. And this is a grown man. Jesus calls him son. And the religious leaders who are hearing what Jesus says, they question in their own hearts, who is this man that he forgives sins? Who does he think he is? Only God alone can forgive sins. You see, Jesus does what only God can do, because sins are ultimately against God. Well, let's now conclude with Jesus being on trial. In particular, his exclusive claim to be the only way to God. I had a Jewish friend called Brian, and I think he was trying to be complimentary to me and to speak about how good our friendship was. And he said, Brian said to me, Tho, our friendship is like blood and water. You know, like we're. But you know, my friendship with the other Jewish friends that we've got in our circle, that's blood and blood. You know, like, we're really good friends, but his friendship with the Jewish friends we had, blood and blood. There's still a divide between me and Brian in his way of thinking. Compare that to the friendship that I've got with our MC today, Russ Matthews. Now, Russ Matthews and Tho Luu, that's me, we're so different. Russ is tall, and I'm obviously different. Think of our heritage. Russ is, you can tell by his accent what he is, American, from Iowa, and I'm Chinese, born in Vietnam, grew up in Australia. I'm confused. Russ, he lives in the western suburbs of Sydney, and I've recently moved to the North Shore. So much difference there. And I'm handsome, Russ. Yet being so different, all the barriers to me and Russ being brothers are broken down. Because both Russ and I believe that Jesus is the way to God. In fact, we believe that Jesus is our only way to God. Jesus' exclusivity becomes the basis of the most wonderful inclusivity that I can think of. Whatever your profession here in the city, whichever part of Sydney that you go home to, whatever your sex, male or female, whatever your ethnic background, whatever wrongs you've done, you can come to God through the one way that God has given, through his Son, Jesus.
Just simply put, is the claim of Jesus arrogant?
Is the claim of Jesus arrogant? It's definitely arrogant if it's not true. I'm trying to think of an analogy, but I can't find it. Just say that I'm the leading scientist who's found a cure to cancer. This is the pill that will cure cancer. I've invented it, and I want to give it to you. And you've got cancer, and you come to me. And I want to, I could tell you about all the other treatments and alternative therapies that you can get, Or I could tell you that this is the cure that I've got, the one cure that will definitely save you from your cancer. Am I arrogant to tell you that I've got the cure? Or am I arrogant to tell you that, you can go explore all the other ways? So it's only arrogant if it's not true. But if it's true, it's the best thing for us to hear, because at the end of the day, we don't want to follow false paths that not only waste our time, but in the end don't lead us to God.
If Jesus is alive, is he in bodily form, and where is he now?
So if Jesus is alive, is he in bodily form, and where is he now? So if Jesus is alive, so I believe that Jesus is alive. So the New Testament speaks of Jesus physically appearing to his disciples, and at one point appearing to more than 500 people at the same time. And they're able to touch him. There is the disciple called Thomas, and he says, I won't believe that Jesus has come back from the dead unless I can touch his hands, the hands where they pierced the nails through and they crucified him, and his side, the side that was pierced with the spear. Jesus appears to him in bodily form, and Jesus invites him to touch him. Jesus also has a meal with his disciples. He eats the fish at the beach. So he's flesh and blood. And it's important that he's flesh and blood, that there's a bodily resurrection. It's not just a spiritual resurrection made up in their minds, that they so wanted Jesus to be alive again that they imagined it or dreamed it. No, the reality is that Jesus is physically alive. Where is he now? So the New Testament talks about him ascending to heaven to be with God at God's right hand. God's right hand being the most important place. And from there, he prepares a place for all others who come to see that he is the way to God. So in the beginning of John chapter 14, Jesus is getting his disciples ready for the time when he's going to get killed and depart from them. And he says, I'm going away and I'm preparing a room for you. And that's when this Thomas that I spoke about says, where's the way? What's this way that you're talking about? And in that light, Jesus says that he is the way, the truth, and the life.
I love to hear what your answer is to this. Where is heaven?
Where is heaven? Where is heaven? Yeah. I'm not sure if I'm going to get my terminology all mixed up and things like that. So sometimes we speak of heavens as the skies. That there's the birds of the skies, they're in heaven. There's the land, and then there's my favourite part of the world at the moment is the sea, where you can go snorkeling and find fish and all that kind of stuff. So it might be that. And so when Jesus bodily resurrected and ascends to heaven, being described as where God is, so you can think of heaven that way. Sometimes we think about heaven in terms of the terminology of the kingdom of God. And the kingdom of God is where Jesus has rule over. And then Jesus says this intriguing thing that with his coming is the coming of the kingdom of God, and the kingdom is within you. So all sorts of things to explore. But if you want to explore that further, then I can chase up the Bible passages for you about that. So where is heaven? So it's where God is, and it's where we're hoping to be, where we know we can be when we recognise that Jesus is the way to God, when we put our trust in him.
All right, there you go. So it's not just left at Mars and go a few kilometers or anything like that.
Is that the Hitchhiker's Guide?
Yeah,
I never understood that book.
Right. All right. Now, this is the question. It's not actually me asking, but it says this. Forgive my ignorance, but does Buddhism teach pluralism in many ways to God?
So I can only speak about Buddhism from the Buddhism that I've grown up with, but my understanding is that there are lots of strands of Buddhism. So even when it comes to the question of God, there is Buddhism where there is no God. And the question of whether there's a creator God is irrelevant. So in that form of Buddhism, Buddhism is a way of life, a philosophy. But in the Buddhism that I grew up with, there are many gods. So I spoke about in my family that we had a statue of Guan Yin, the goddess of mercy, and she was just one of many gods that we recognised. So that when we went to the Buddhist temple in Bonnyrigg, I would take my grandma and grandpa and we would go from shrine to shrine with the incense praying to all the different deities. You would see it in the Chinese restaurants or Thai restaurants sometimes, that there's a mantle with incense, and I think there's a kitchen god and all sorts of other gods. So yes, so there are lots of forms of Buddhism, even with the question of whether there's a one God or many gods or no God can differ with that. And I've forgotten the rest of the question.
Oh, no, that was it. Except for they did add on. They said, so what makes believing in one God better?
So the belief in one God is shared by the Jewish faith, the Muslim faith, and the Christian faith. So these are the monotheistic religions of the world. But the difference, as I've shared in the talk, is who Jesus is. And as you can see, all three faith traditions have a different view of who Jesus is, and therefore the way to God.
So you know your answers must have, all of a sudden we've had a flurry of questions come in. Sorry. You ready? Is it okay? Is that the answer? All right. Here we go. Next one. You talked about truth, You talked about Jesus being the truth. How do you test truth of something? Is it best to try for something like the life of Pi?
So I just realised that I probably haven't really answered the other question in terms of Buddhism and God thing. So my journey that I can share is that so I was at Darling Harbour with my friend Gina of all places, and we were there when it just opened. And so it's just Gina and I was still a Buddhist at this stage, and we were looking at all these beautiful fish at the Darling Harbour Aquarium. And you see all the sizes and different colours. And Gina, I think, just as a off-the-cuff sort of comment, how can anyone believe that there isn't a God, when we're looking at all these beautiful things in all their variety? But then I thought, where do I stand with that? So that got me on the path of thinking that there is a creator God to whom I owe my existence, to whom this variety of life and beauty in the world that I enjoy belongs its existence. And as I was exploring Buddhism more seriously, I came to see that that Buddhism was trying to get disconnected from things that can cause you either pleasure or pain, so that you can have this middle path where you neither get too happy or too sad. You never get disappointed. And I was thinking, out of all the things that give me the greatest joy and the deepest sorrow, it's relationships. So from now on, let's not get too attached to anyone, so that they neither make you too happy or hurt you. So my answer when my friends asked about how do I feel about this or that, I'm indifferent. So that became the path that I wanted to follow. But with this exploration into Christianity, this thing of recognising the beauty of all these fish in Darling Harbour, the aquarium, I came to see that there are good things to enjoy, and they should be enjoyed. And there are things that bring a lot of pain, and it's right that we don't like those things that bring lots of pain, but it's good to enjoy the things that bring joy. And that sort of led me to this journey to think about God being the giver of all these good things in the world to enjoy. So hopefully that connects with the one God question and how it connects. Great. Sorry, what's the other one? The truth?
Oh, they just keep coming. Are you ready
Life
for
of
that?
Pi, yeah.
Yeah, you ready? Okay, well, the truth. How can you determine the truth? This was actually it encompasses a couple of the questions. Yeah. So how do you test the truth? How do you know that Jesus' claims are the truth?
Yeah. So with my journey, and that's what I'm asking you to objectively do as well, is a great first step is to read one of the biographies of Jesus that we have for free out on the information table there, whether it's Matthew, which is the first gospel, and that's the gospel that I started with, or any of the other gospels, Mark, Luke, or John. Have a read of the gospel and listen to Jesus' teaching. Does it sound plausible? Does it ring with authority? Does it sound true? So read it and see what you think of Jesus as you read it. This whole thing of Jesus being on trial, the Bible being on trial, give it a go. So that's what I recommend. And come to a conclusion. If Jesus is the way, if he is the truth, then the search is over. But if he's not, then you can keep exploring. But there's one avenue to exploring whether Jesus is the truth and the way to God. Start with the Bible.
You ready for another one? Yeah, you got everybody excited with their thumbs today here, Tor. All right, next one. Are there different ways within Christianity, as far as looking at the many different paths, as far as looking at all the different denominations that are represented? They listed off quite a few here. Catholicism, Anglicanism, Jehovah's Witness. Do all these paths also lead to the same God?
So not only under the Buddhism umbrella are there many strands, also within the Christian umbrella there are many strands, denominations. So my journey is that I had no idea about denominations. So I secretly started going along to church on a Sunday morning, hoping that no one in my family would notice. I'm just going to go for a walk, and I'd walk up to Randwick and found myself with my Gideon's Bible. And then I was just there for a couple of weeks with my Bible, and I got asked to collect all the money in the church. I was thinking, wow, giving me a responsibility. I don't even know what's going on. And a stumbling point actually was for me was that I had all these friends who went to all these different churches. So there's Daniel from South Korea originally, and I'm thinking, he speaks Korean. He's called Daniel, and the reason why he's Christian is because, and the reason why he's got a Christian name is because with South America, with the Americans being there, that's why he's Christian. And then there's Philip. He's from Hong Kong. The reason why he's Christian and his name's Philip is because of the British and what they did in Hong Kong. My name's Tho, and I'm going to keep being called Tho because I'm authentically Chinese, that sort of thing. I'm not going to sell out like my friends have, sort of thing. And so the question came, why does Daniel go to a Korean church, and why does Philip go to a Chinese church? And if they all believe the same thing, why don't they all go to the thing? But then Daniel very gently and kindly explained to me that not everyone can speak English. So he's in his church, like the people who are Korean, there's only going to be one way they explain will understand what's been said. So hence the need for his church where things are done in Korean and that. But yeah, with all the other denominations, there's the Roman Catholics, the Anglicans, the Presbyterians, the Scottish. One of my favourite things with this is that, in my understanding, one of the oldest, maybe it's not the oldest, but one of the biggest Presbyterian churches in Australia is the one in Surrey Hills. And you know what it's called? It's the Chinese Presbyterian Church. I just think of all these Chinese people with kilts or something like that. So you can see that at the end of the day, Christianity is when we've got Jesus in common and Jesus at the centre. It doesn't have to do with issues of race or language. Ultimately, there are reasons for having different groups in different languages, and even with the denominations that have faith in Jesus as the way to God, that even the denominations work with each other and agree on the centrality of Jesus being the only way to God. So Russ goes to a Baptist church.
I know.
And no longer. He used to.
No, I do. Yeah.
Oh, he's still Baptist.
Yeah.
And I think I go to an independent church, but Russ and I believe the same thing, that we both need forgiveness from God, and that forgiveness comes through Jesus alone. That Jesus did everything for us to have forgiveness from God.